Joining me now from Edmonton is former Prime Minister Kim Campbell, who is also, among many other things, now a founding principal of the Peter Lougheed Leadership College at the University of Alberta, and that's why she's in Edmonton. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Okay, so obviously, this is a big moment for Hillary Clinton. It's a big moment for the United States as she becomes the first woman to be a presidential nominee for a major political party. As someone who's gone through this, broken down lots of political barriers yourself, what do you think it means for the United States, for women?
I think it's an incredible achievement. I think there's no question about it, because she won this nomination through an unexpectedly tough primary process. In the same way, in 2008, she lost the nomination in a very tough primary process. Nobody can say this was handed to her on a platter. I mean, yes, she's been working at it for years, but I think it's an extraordinary achievement. But it also brings out all of the barriers that non-prototypical leaders face when they aspire to certain positions. So it's been very interesting to see this kind of case study, this almost classic representation of what it means to be somebody who is not the typical person to do a job aspiring to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy to think that a woman is not the typical person to do this job, that we are still at that moment in 2016 where this hasn't happened, and we're saying, oh, this is extraordinary. How does that strike you, that it took us this long to get here?
Well, it's disappointing. There have been sort of, chinks in the armor as, women have certainly at the state level and provincial level in Canada achieved goals. But you know what's interesting? If you look at the Trump campaign, a lot of that represents the pushback of what has been gained by hitherto marginalized groups in American society. And that includes women. And what is interesting about the total abandonment of any of the rules of polite political discourse or constructive political discourse is that you see the vocabulary of misogyny coming out. And that is really shocking, because I think a lot of us like to feel that when we see women doing well and making advancements, that yes, there might be some people who are not that happy, but that it's generally accepted. But to see the rearguard vocabulary and the fact that Donald Trump has totally removed any kind of inhibitions about speaking about it in the cruelest way, it's really shocking.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we did a story just recently about some of the buttons that appeared at the Republican convention around Hillary Clinton, and they were the most sort of shocking misogynist language that you honestly, I didn't expect, including the B word and what have you.
And the C word.
Yes, and the C word. Yeah, and why is that happening? Do you think it's because it's Hillary Clinton that there's something where people are more comfortable attacking her because of her husband, or because she's been a public figure for so long? What do you make of that?
Well, there's another thread that's going through contemporary politics, particularly in the United States, and you saw it in the Brexit campaign in Europe, in Britain also, and that is what people might call a post-fact politics, a total disregard for the truth. So you see with Hillary, because she's been in the public eye a long time, she and Bill both have been in the center of a number of scandals, some of them justifiably so, some of them not. But every time she is accused of doing something, and there is a credible process which examines it, like Kenneth Starr looking at Whitewater. Ken Starr was a Republican. Ken Starr, who was the Whitewater guy, was incidentally concluded that there was no illegal activity, now actually supports her and is sorry he was even involved in that. But every time, it's like with Obama and the birtherism, every time, like the Benghazi thing, the Republican-led majority House committee that studied Benghazi and has put her through 11 hours of direct testimony, incidentally, which shows that she has the stamina. I mean, this woman must have an adrenal gland the size of a football. She's extraordinary. If anybody thinks she can't take it, you haven't been watching. But the fact is that this committee, which if it could conceivably have found some way to blame her, would have, came out and, as the chairman said, no. But that doesn't matter. We're in a kind of post-fact society. So the fact that Barack Obama was clearly born in Hawaii, and the Republican governor of Hawaii at one point said, "This is ridiculous. I knew his parents, and I remember when he was born." This is a Republican, not even Democrat. That she is facing this unwillingness. You think you're accused of things, and you answer. or some independent body answers. But it doesn't matter. Don't confuse me with facts. And this, I think, is very hard for somebody who's been in public life for a long time, because you can dredge up a lot of stuff, and even though there's nothing to it, you keep throwing it at her. But the viciousness is really amazing. But what I think is remarkable is her stamina and the fact that she has not melted down, that she has not, lost her cool, and has learned, and maybe from Elizabeth Warren too, the value of ridicule and humor.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, she's very, very tough. That I don't think anyone could dispute that. Donald Trump has said about Hillary Clinton that the only thing she has going for is her woman card. What do you make of? Yeah,
give me a break. What does he have going for him? Frankly, he doesn't even have that going for him. And the woman that he hoped to deal out into the public turns out to be a plagiarizer. But anyway, but isn't that to be expected? She has nothing going for her. No, she was only, had this distinguished career as a lawyer, and then as a member of the Senate, and then as Secretary of State. No, that's nothing. I know a woman has, Charlotte Whitten said that a woman had to be twice as good as a man in order to be thought half as good, but fortunately that was easy. And, Hillary Clinton's career perhaps proves that. But Donald Trump, I mean, you cannot take anything he says as anything but the insane ravings of a man who unfortunately has tapped into a lot of the backlash to the changes that have been made in American society. And again, this is, crime is, we got runaway crime. Well, actually, the crime statistics show that crime has been dropping in the United States, both violent crime and property crime. But, don't confuse him with facts. I want to believe the worst. I want to believe all of these things. But what bothers me is that the vocabulary and the things that were said about Hillary Clinton, not just, lock her up, but, she should be taken out and shot. Excuse me. That ain't okay. It doesn't matter what the gender of the candidate is. And it frightens me that Donald Trump is sort of saying, not only are we not into political correctness, but anything goes, and she's fair game for anything. And that is not okay.
Let's talk a little bit about her weaknesses, because I mean, like any candidate, she has weaknesses. One of them that has been much discussed and written about, particularly during the primaries, was sort of, and this was more when Bernie Sanders was still viable, was her inability to do very well with young women. For some reason, she was very off-putting for young women, and a lot of those young women flocked towards Bernie Sanders. What do you think that was about, and do you think that a younger generation of women can be brought over to Clinton?
Well, I would hope they can be, because here's the thing I'll say about Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton and I were born in the same year. And so we're part of the same generation. And women in my generation who were ambitious about getting involved in public life and getting involved in things where men dominated, often were deterred from raising women's issues too much, because women's issues were seen as the things we'll deal with after we've solved the serious problems. And a lot of women, myself included, were reluctant to really get on the bandstand for things that related to women and children. Hillary Clinton never did that. Hillary Clinton, right from the very beginning, was out there fighting for women. Now, maybe because she went to an all-woman college, going to Wellesley, which is one of the great universities in the United States, and maybe she developed that confidence there. But she was not, it took me some time to have the confidence to do that, and by the time I certainly got into national government, I was very comfortable describing myself as a feminist. But for a lot of women, we were kind of intimidated and made to feel that we wouldn't be able to play in the boys' club. She never did that, and I hope young women realize that she's been playing in the girls' club for women and girls and their rights from a time when it was not fashionable, when it was not easy for an ambitious woman to do that. And I respect that. I respect that enormously. And I've talked to a lot of women of my generation, a little bit younger, some journalists who've said the same thing, that the big thing was to be accepted by the boys. And when people say to me, oh, Kim, you're so smart and you think like a man. Well, I don't think like a man. I think like a woman. But that was the trap. And she never fell into it. And young women today often are late to discover the realities of sexism, because in schools and things there's much more openness, and often you hear the young women who at universities who think there isn't any sexism, they get out into the work world and they discover that there is. So I would hope that young women would come to understand that there is a value in having the glass ceiling broken, but that in substantive terms in terms of policy, and incidentally, she's the only one talking about policy. Donald Trump isn't talking about policy, and he wouldn't have any that would be helpful for women anyway. But that she has been very much committed to making a world where they can be whatever they want to be. And I hope that she'll get a chance to keep doing that.
I'll end on this. What do you think? You know, certainly there are a lot of women leaders right now in the world. If you look around, Theresa May, Angela Merkel, and others. What do you think a woman president for the United States? What would it do? What would it change in terms of how that country, where that country is headed? And I'm not necessarily talking policy related, but sort of tonally, what would it change?
Well, interesting that there are actually fewer women leaders now than there were a few years ago. But what's interesting is that there are women leaders in some of the really big, heavy-hitting countries, Germany, Great Britain, and possibly the United States. I think that what it changes is our perception of who gets to do that job. You know, and in the same way, I thought it was great when the Prime Minister made a cabinet of 50% women, because the visible effect, the landscape from which people derive their sense of how the world works changes when different people get to participate, when people who normally have not been seen. And you look at, look at the Paul Ryan selfie that he did with the interns in Washington. Yeah. It's a white faces. And if you take that for granted, if you don't question it, you don't know what's missing. And so I think when you bring in women women into these fields where they haven't been before, you change the expectation. We now kind of take Angela Merkel for granted. You know, we think about the positions that she takes. We don't think of her as being the woman Chancellor Angela Merkel. She's Angela Merkel. Like her or hate her, she's Angela Merkel. And she has mainstreamed, trousers and a jacket for women politicians, for which we should all be very grateful. Hillary had to start in that too, mainstreaming the pantsuit. A lot to be said for that.
All right, Kim Campbell, I could keep you for a long time. I do appreciate your reflections on this. Thank you very much.
Right, going to be interesting to watch. Thanks.